We've got talk two now coming up. Vamsi, were you around? All right, cool, man. Well, I got you up here. Do you want to share your screen real fast, and then we'll
Yep.
get rocking and rolling on your talk too?
Uh, cool. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I'm Vamsi. I'm the CTO of Contour, and I'm going to be talking about building AI agents for financial institutions. And so maybe before deep diving into that, I'll do a little bit of background on who we are and what we do. So Contour is an AI customer support platform for financial institutions, and we enable 24/7 high quality agentic and omni-channel support for financial institutions. So I can break down each part a little bit later, but in terms of agentic, I'll define that a little bit. And then in terms of omni-channel, it just means we handle voice, chat, email, any kind of interface where institutions can communicate with their customers. And on top of that, we also do a lot of QA and agent performance tracking for both real human support agents, but also our own AI support agents. And then something that's extremely important in the financial world and for financial institutions is compliance workflows for their customer complaints. This is part of the intricacies of working in like a highly regulated vertical, is that there's going to be a lot of rules and regulations about what you do and how you handle customer communications. And so kind of keeping that in mind as you build out your agentic platform is super important. And so when we think about building agents for finance, I think there's a lot of rules and regulations that come up. It's one of the harshest and kind of most regulated industries to build AI agents for. A lot of it is because, of course, you're touching money, which is always extremely protected, um, and obviously highly regulated. There's basically no margin for error because you're impacting the most sensitive element of their business. And when I say that, a lot of people assume I'm talking about the customer communications, and obviously that's very important too. But it's really because you're, at the end of the day, touching money. And as long as you're touching money, you cannot have any sort of error with how your AI agent performs. And kind of as an add-on to that, if you're not touching money and you are trying to be more of a surface level support agent, um, you're just not solving enough of a problem. The way we try to think about it is if you're not resolving the actual issues with your agent, then you're not really providing value to your client. And so, with these in mind, kind of the things you really have to think about and the way we can think about them is to ensure that your agents are very compliant. So, building in strong, customizable guardrails is super key, whether that comes from knowledge-based integrations or like them uploading, our standard operating procedures or docs on how like agents should respond, or whether it's more kind of like workflow building and being like, hey, like in these kind of scenarios, make sure the agent has some kind of canned response or a default response that it goes to. Whatever form that takes, it's important to make sure that that is very strictly built in to your agent. The knowledge-based integration at this point is basically a baseline. It's not really enough to set you apart as an AI agent in this industry. And so what we've come to realize and see is that being able to cite your sources and show your reasoning and train of thought is honestly more important than just having a knowledge-based integration. Um, Being able to have transparency and explainability into why your AI agent did what it did is the most important part of building agents in this kind of vertical. And then the last part is if you want to actually resolve issues and be a useful agent, you will often have to integrate with core banking systems, digital payment platforms, other kind of integrations to actually perform an action and resolve issues and solve real problems. And so these are kind of important components to keep in mind when you think about building AI agents in this vertical. And oftentimes when people say, "Oh, I'm building a agent to do blah blah blah" in a vertical, especially in this vertical, but also in general, this is kind of what the flow looks like for them. In our case, because we do customer support, I've laid out kind of the diagrams to go over that case. But in this case, like you would take in a user ticket, your agent maybe has some knowledge base integrations some compliance regulations, just basic RAG, basically, of our knowledge base. It takes in the ticket, does some RAG, spits out an answer. This is what most people do. And this is not effective really in any way, but it's especially not effective in like a real production environment for actual banks, credit unions, and fintechs. Um, and so really the minimum viable solution that people will tell you is to have your workflow look something like this. A ticket comes in, you have to authorize the user first because that will give you context about who the user is, what kind of information can you provide them, what are the guardrails in place for them, what are other external information you should keep in mind when answering this question. You will still have the existing knowledge base integrations, the standard operating procedure, all that stuff, but you will take into account the user profile, actual information about the user before spitting out the answer. And so when you ask people, when you talk to people in the industry, they'll be like, no, it's not this that we want. It's actually this that we want. But really, it's also not this that they want. What they really want is kind of something like this, where a user comes in with an issue, you authenticate the user, but you have two kind of parallel trains of thought. One is, oh, okay, we have an integration with a knowledge base, we have operating procedures, we're going to go through them based on what they're complaining about, based on their profile, and figure out what to do. And then the other train of thought is, okay, based on this account, based on where they bank or what they integrate with or what kind of services they provide, we also need to look at what kind of actions can we take, what can we read from? So can we read transaction history? Can we read past tickets? Can we read past interactions with the institution? Can we use all of that as context to figure out what it is we're doing? And putting all of these trains of thought together, along with the user information, and then generating an answer is going to provide the most useful and authentic kind of experience for the end customer. Because in that point, it'll actually feel like they're talking to a real support agent, because the agent will have context about their past, their accounts, their past transactions, what will actually be able to take actions for them. So if they say, hey, I have a weird, transaction on my bank account, I need to help fix that. If you actually have the digital payments platform integration or the core banking integration, then your AI agent can be like, oh, I can actually dispute the transaction for you. At which point it becomes a useful AI agent instead of just being an LLM call. And so this is where a lot of people will often stop. They will assume, okay, once we get to this point, cool, we've solved the problem. We've made like a functional AI agent for this industry. But unfortunately, this is not where it stops. And this is what obviously we at Contour are trying to fix. And it's still an open problem. But this is kind of our approach to how we orchestrate our AI agents, specifically for support and in financial industries. We have a lot of the same things still in place. A ticket comes in, authorize the user, have the true trains of thought. But the one distinction that we want to make is that we don't want the LLM to perform actions or use tools straight from the call, because there you are introducing kind of a margin for error that is too large to be usable in a production environment. So instead of having it perform the actions directly, like in this case, we have another step with a validation and reasoning step where it's a counter argument to what the agent is doing or what the agent has first generated, where we say, okay, based on the guardrails we have, based on compliance information, based on your own operating procedures, is this the right thing for the AI agent to do? Can you 100% explain why you were doing what you're doing, what tools you're using, why you're using the tools, and what the expected response should be from the tools? And once you can cross-validate, then you can perform an action and give an answer back to the user and say, okay, based on your complaint of a weird transaction, we're able to look through your past transactions. You're right. You don't have any history of this. We also have other information to verify that you were making purchases in New York, but the weird transaction came from LA, so it makes sense to dispute the transaction. And because of those reasons, I used a tool call to put in the actual dispute. for the transaction. And so having that kind of explainability and visibility into why the agent is doing what it's doing is not only useful to reduce hallucinations and reduce the error margin, but it's extremely important to actually show to the financial institution why the agent is doing what it's doing. It builds trust in your process, it builds trust in your product, and it builds trust for you as the company. And so this is kind of where we've landed. This is by no means a perfect approach. There's still a lot of work to be done kind of in this orchestration and how to think about building agents in this vertical. But this has been quite effective so far. And, we're kind of excited to see where it goes from here. But so far, I've been talking a lot about kind of building AI agents in this sense. And I've been kind of implicitly talking about kind of like the chat, email, messaging kind of interfaces where all of these trains of thoughts can happen because the interaction with the end customer is kind of asynchronous. You can take, like 5, 6 seconds, perform a few LLM calls, do this whole process before spitting out an answer when you're interacting over chat or when you're interacting over email. But all of this changes a little bit if you're interacting over the phone. Obviously, phone conversations are not going to be, you can't wait 4 or 5 seconds between each response. The user is probably going to hang up or get really annoyed. And there's a lot more intricacies when it comes to building voice agents for financial institutions. Specifically, most of the time when people pick up the phone to call a financial institution, it's not to be like, hey, what's up? How are you doing? I want some information about blah, blah, blah. It's because they're pissed or they're angry or they're upset or something is wrong with their money. And if you don't have a frontline defense for handling that kind of emotion, you're not going to have a very effective voice agent. So, we've come to understand that our voice agents have to be able to handle the initial emotion quite well and also be able to deflect or transfer properly. Um, Oftentimes, people will call in, and if they hear what they think is like a Cartesia voice or something, they will get incredibly upset. They will be even more upset than they already were. And, that results in all sorts of issues there. And so what you want to be able to do is have really, really good and really, really authentic TTS. Um, for most people, we recommend not using a default TTS provider voice. I know there's like a lot of new ones that come out pretty much every week at this point. Providers will launch new, like, oh, the most hyper realistic voice like we've ever launched. Um, and they will sound great in very curated scenarios, but on a real call with an angry customer who's asking about where their money went, most of the time, if they hear 11 Labs voice, they're going to get even more pissed off. And so whether it's, fine tuning, voice cloning, whatever other approaches you can take to make the voice more authentic, that is something actually worthwhile and worth the investment of time and effort. A lot of people focus on the LLM element of voice agents. It's like, oh, we have to be 100% accurate. And that's obviously very, very important. But being able to have a truly authentic voice has been almost as important, if not more important, in kind of getting us over the hump with people. And this kind of goes to the earlier talk, but you want to invest in having really good evals and emotion analysis for your voice agents. A lot of the times, the evals that you do for yourself you can feel are pretty good, but a lot of times people just end up doing evals on the LLM portion of the voice agent and not actually the voice. And so, we partner with other people. We partner with companies like Coval that do voice evals. We can use external products. Like all of that is a worthwhile investment to building really high quality production level voice agents. Like this is the kind of response you want from people who try your product. It's like, hey, like I just had like a really grumpy aunt call your voice agent and she was really impressed. Like you want people who are angry, you want people who are upset, you want people who are like mean, you want people who are worried about their money to be able to talk to your voice agent and be like, oh, okay, like cool. That actually handled my issue, that calmed me down. It did what it was supposed to do quickly, and I was able to, resolve my problem. And when it comes to performance with voice agents, kind of re-emphasizing what I was saying earlier, latency is like the showstopper. It's what brings people in. It's like, oh wow, like they have incredible like quickness. The voice responds really quickly. That's awesome. Um, but if you ever say anything incorrect, that is the deal breaker. So as important as it is to, have really fast voice agents, is much more important to be accurate. We've taken a lot of, trade-offs with speed versus accuracy in terms of what kind of models we use, how expensive the model calls are, how much context do we pass into the models. But at the end of the day, you can make micro optimizations for 100 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds of latency gain. But if you're losing accuracy in the process, it's almost never worth it. And that validation step that I was talking about with chat agents and email agents still has to occur in the voice agents, but it obviously has to be way faster because we don't have the kind of async nature of chat and email communication when it comes to voice. And so oftentimes what we do is use smaller models and use much more constrained questions when it comes to how to validate. When we have the time to validate chat and email, we can kind of do multi-layered validation. But when it comes to voice, we often do single layer validation, and we also often validate in sync with some kind of templated placeholder TTS. So for example, if you need to make a tool call to check on a user's like past transactions, you can oftentimes validate what you're getting from that tool call while still saying something. So it doesn't feel like the customer is just waiting for the voice agent to make a tool call. So kind of keeping a lot of like parallel optimizations in place can help a lot when it comes to performance with voice agents. At the end of the day, when it comes to building AI agents for financial institutions, most of it comes down to building trust. A lot of times co-pilots are a great like in between meeting point when it comes to trust. A lot of companies will try to sell you like, hey, we have a fully agentic like AI chatbot or voice agent. It'll take calls, it'll perform actions, it'll resolve issues. And same thing with the chat and messaging agents. But oftentimes offering a co-pilot where there's a human involved, they can approve or edit whatever the AI suggests and 10x their overall speed when it comes to responding to tickets is a great meeting point because then the support team, the client can see why and how your agent performs, get explainability into what kind of things the agent is thinking about, build in the right guardrails, build in the right workflows before actually trusting you with fully automated agentic support. And as much as you can, you should take great pains to be as transparent as possible with your AI agent's reasoning. Um, Oftentimes, like people just provide um, the LLM response and then like a one-step layer of reasoning. But having that additional validation step where it's like, okay, this was the original LLM response, and maybe if you're using like a reasoning model, this was the trace for why it reasoned. But then if you're able to say, and then we cross-validated it with like this counter agent where it double-checked all of its sources, it's able to explain why the tool call is necessary. It's able to explain why or what it expects as a result from the tool call. Being able to expose all of that to the client builds so much more trust than just being like, hey, this was our LLM response and this is like the reasoning trace from like an O1 call or something, right? And specifically when it comes to voice, we have pretty harsh bailouts. There's a lot of like emotion and sentiment triggers where if we feel like the customer is extremely angry or extremely upset, like beyond a reasonable measure, oftentimes like you just don't want to risk it. And we have pretty like strict kind of guidelines in place for, okay, if it's above this kind of level, just auto transfer to a human, like don't risk any kind of negative feedback, any kind of negative interaction. Um, Same thing for kind of sensitive topics. Obviously, a lot of that is something that the client defines, but you can also be proactive in defining that and being able to say like, hey, um, I did a, like a tool call of transactions. It looks like the monetary value is above this amount. We should probably just transfer this to a real person because this is probably a, high value client. We don't want to mess anything up here. Uh, being, having like very harsh bailouts is a great way to build trust again, um, and allow the client to define what kind of guidelines and restrictions are in place. So yeah, that's kind of what we do at Contour. That's how we think about building, voice agents and AI agents in general for financial institutions. If you want to learn more about us, check us out at trycontour.com.
Dude, so awesome. And you are playing the game on hard mode, my friend. Voice agents in the finance world. That is
Yes.
unreal. Dude, so hard. So hard. So, if anybody wants to ask a question, feel free to throw up your hand or um, I've got one specifically
Mhm.
that I threw in there right away, which is around the speed and trust. And I know you
Mhm.
mentioned like speed is a big deal, but then
Yeah.
trust is a bigger deal. And
Yeah.
aren't they at odds with each other?
They are. It's the hardest part of doing this is kind of finding the right balance between the two. Oftentimes, separating where the trade-off happens for the different interfaces is extremely useful. So I was mentioning when you're doing chat messages or email messages, speed is not nearly as important. And so you obviously want to lean heavily towards trust and validation and accuracy. When it comes to voice, speed is extremely important. But obviously you still need the right amount of like trust and validation. Oftentimes what we do there is limit what the like action space of the agent is. And so we have built in trust at a certain axis of like at a certain like point in speed.
Yeah.
And if we want to increase speed, we reduce like the action space further and further. But it's something that we can work with the client with because I mean, I'll be honest, voice like providers have gotten really, really good. The overall latency, you should not really be having a voice agent that takes more than like maximum like a second and a half to respond to
Mhm.
someone. Um, like you must be doing like a ton of like calls if you're getting to that level of latency. And for all practical purposes, when a human's on the phone, the difference between 700 milliseconds and 900 milliseconds is not that clear to them. It's more
Yeah.
of like an ego thing as like the developer. It's like, oh, cool, like I got my voice agent down, like another 100 milliseconds, but it's not really worth it practically.
Yeah. The other thing that I was gonna ask, and if anybody has some, feel free to jump in and just come off mute or raise your hand. But how do you figure out, like, are you giving these agents write access? You know,
Mhm.
that seems scary.
No, yeah, write access is almost never given to the voice agents, or honestly any of the agents. Most of the time, what they really want is read access and write access outside of the banking system. So most institutions have like a third party that they manage a lot of their like banking cores with or digital payments with. It's like the Venmo or Zelle layer on top of the actual account, or
Mhm.
like a Jack Henry or Fiserv on top of the actual like where the money sits. And so they will often give you write access to the third party provider, and then they have their own kind of controls in place for what the provider can do to the real money. And so as long as you can update, like you can go in and be like, okay, this transaction needs to be disputed or this needs to be refunded. Put in the ticket into the third party provider, and then they can take it from there with the real money.
Mhm. What you got, Aditya? I see you with your hand up.
Uh, yeah. Thanks, Vamsi. It was great presentation. I'm just wondering, let's say right now, I believe everything is in English, all the voice, all the way
Mhm.
LLM, but like within English, you would have different kind of accent on
Yeah,
like the people who are immigrants and like the
yeah.
people like who just have broken English and
Mhm.
they need assistance and also like the also if you want to expand it beyond US or
Yeah.
like within US there are multilingual things. So how do we go with that? Because it's a hard problem. And second thing is
It
like
is.
if you want to have the human in loop, it's going to be super expensive. You want to hire the specialized people in that
Mm-hmm.
particular language, right? So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how you're thinking about that particular aspect, like just expanding it to
Yeah.
multilinguality and also taking into consideration the people who
Mm-hmm.
have like broken English. Because I mean, to have the wide customer base, you would want to cater to, of course, like have the main segment first,
Mm-hmm.
but then like the second, third, fourth segment, like of the English speaking, like how would you are thinking? Yeah, just want to understand your thought process.
No, that's a great question. So we currently, like in practicality, we really only do, I think, 7 or 8 languages, and they're kind of like the major, like well established in the sense there's good models for them, languages. When it comes to kind of non-standard or literally any of the other hundreds of languages that exist in the world, that also need support, um, it is hard to have good voice agents for them. I think chat, obviously, it's a more constrained and more solved kind of area, but it's very hard to have good voice agents for them. And so, for the most part, we currently don't offer support. We work a lot with kind of transcription and TTS services. We've worked with PlayHT or PlayAI, 11 Labs, Cartesia, DeepGram, all these folks. Rhyme is another one that is more new, that's doing great work, that are kind of training, um, either training or fine tuning on more or less known languages. And we can collaborate with them and be like, hey, like we have calls coming in from like, I don't know, like Arabic or something, right? Let's like some language that's maybe not one of our supported ones, and be like, we want this audio. Like we want to use this audio to both build our own transcription services, but also kind of fine tune our TTS services. And so we can take in the calls that are coming in where we're not supporting it, where like our AI agent isn't supporting it, and like a human is answering, and be like, okay, we're going to use this as like a data set and kind of help improve our own transcription and TTS. It's the same thing that we kind of did with our current voice. I mean, I can actually demo it pretty quickly, but we fine tuned our voice, so our voice is not like a random like 11 Labs or like Cartesia like voice. It was voice that was like fine tuned on people like doing support because that's what we do. And so like we want the kind of like tonality, the inflections, the like uhs, the ums, the whatevers, the like, hey, like let me check that for you, like that kind of stuff to come through in the voice agent. Um, and obviously all of that, yeah, right now is done mostly in English, but we want to be able to transfer all of that work we did in English to these other languages by building up kind of like the audio data sets.
So you are secretly hoping an LLM from language to language real time come up, and you are that would be
I
like
mean,
a boom.
that would be game changing. Yes, that would solve a lot of problems. It would save me a lot of time listening to random language calls. So
that you don't
I would
understand.
love that.
Yeah.
No, truly, yeah. I don't understand a word of what's happening,
Yeah.
but it's there.
You've got that data. Yeah, that's awesome.